Rain, a late shift, a gunshot. She drags a bleeding stranger into a back room and saves his life. By sunrise, she's fired, and a black car is waiting. He's not just any man, he's the city's most feared protector and problem. He moves her and her little boy to a high-rise for safety, but danger follows them home. Cars burn, cameras flash, and hidden in her tote is a battered phone with secrets that could break his empire. Someone close to him wants her scared, silent, gone. The single mom won't run. She sets a trap by the water, forcing a public trade where every lie goes live. Shots ring, a traitor is unmasked, and the king does the one thing no one expected. Will a mother's choice tame a monster, or start a war that takes everything she loves? The midnight rain drummed against the diner's metal awning as Riley wiped down the last of the tables. Her fingers ached from hours of carrying plates, and all she wanted was to get home to Milo. The neon sign outside cast pink and blue shadows through the wet windows, making the empty restaurant feel like an Edward Hopper painting come to life. The gunshot cracked through the night like thunder. Riley froze, dish rag dripping onto her sensible shoes. Most people would have called 911 or locked the doors, but something, maybe stupidity, maybe the memory of another night when she'd done nothing, made her move toward the back door. The alley stank of wet cardboard and yesterday's cooking grease. Through the curtain of rain, she saw him. A dark figure slumped against the dumpster, one hand pressed to his side. His suit probably cost more than she made in a month, but now it was soaked and stained with something darker than rain. "Hey," she whispered, crouching beside him. "Can you walk?" His eyes, sharp despite the pain, locked onto hers. "Leave." "Yeah, not happening." Riley glanced toward the street as engine sounds grew closer. "Someone's coming. Inside. Now." He tried to resist as she hauled him up, but blood loss made him clumsy. She half-dragged him through the kitchen to the supply room, easing him down behind a stack of boxes. His breathing came in short gasps, but he didn't make a sound. "Take off the jacket," she ordered, grabbing clean dish towels from a shelf. When he didn't move fast enough, she pushed his hands aside and did it herself. The wound was a deep graze across his ribs. Nasty, but not fatal, if she could stop the bleeding. His gun clattered to the floor. Riley kicked it under a flour sack without missing a beat. "Press here," she said, guiding his hands to hold the towels in place. "Breathe slow." Headlights swept across the walls as cars pulled into the alley. Heavy footsteps splashed through puddles. Riley's heart hammered, but she kept her movements steady as she pressed another towel against his side. The stranger's face was all harsh angles in the dim light, but his eyes held something beyond pain, a calculating intelligence that should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself noticing other details. The gentle way he touched her wrist when she tied off the makeshift bandage. How he positioned himself to keep her behind him when voices approached the back door. Minutes stretched like hours until the footsteps and engines faded. Riley helped him stand, noting how he tested his weight before letting her take any of it. "Back stairs," she whispered. "They lead to the street behind the building." He moved like a man used to injury, efficient despite the pain. At the stairwell door, Riley retrieved his gun from under the flour. "Promise you won't point this at me, and it's yours." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "You have my word." His voice was rough but warm, like whiskey over gravel. She placed the gun in his hand and stepped back, watching as he melted into the rain-soaked darkness. The whole encounter felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than her ordinary life of dinner shifts and daycare pickup. The wall clock read 1:40 a.m. when Riley finished scrubbing blood from the linoleum. Her back ached, and her uniform smelled like copper and rain. As she gathered her things, something heavy dropped from the stranger's discarded jacket, a battered flip phone that had slipped from his pocket. She pocketed it without thinking, too tired to do anything else. The rain had softened to a fine mist as she walked home, her shoes squeaking on wet sidewalks. The city felt different somehow, charged with possibility and danger she'd never noticed before. Milo's babysitter, Mrs. Chen from upstairs, was dozing on the couch when Riley unlocked her apartment door. The TV flickered silently, casting blue light over her son's toys scattered across the floor. She paid Mrs. Chen, locked up behind her, and crept into Milo's room. He slept sprawled across his race car bed, one arm wrapped around his favorite stuffed dinosaur. Riley brushed dark curls from his forehead, her throat tight with love and fear. What had she done tonight? What might have happened if those men had found her helping their target? In her tiny bathroom, Riley peeled off her damp clothes and examined her hands under harsh fluorescent light. No blood remained, but she could still feel the stranger's grip on her wrist, still see the intensity in his eyes when she'd demanded his promise about the gun. She took a scalding shower, trying to wash away the night's events. But even as steam filled the bathroom, her mind kept returning to the supply room, to the way he'd stayed silent despite his pain, how he'd angled his body to protect her from the door, the unexpected gentleness in his touch. The phone in her pocket felt like a burning coal when she finally crawled into bed. She should throw it away, drop it in a public trash can far from home. Instead, she tucked it into her bedside drawer, telling herself she'd decide what to do with it tomorrow. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by the distant wail of sirens and the soft sound of rain. Riley drifted off thinking about a stranger's promises in the dark, never imagining she would see him again. But the city had other plans, and the phone in her drawer would prove to be far more than a forgotten piece of evidence from a rainy night's mercy. Her last conscious thought was of Milo, of keeping him safe and happy in their small corner of the world. She'd already risked too much tonight. She couldn't afford to get involved in whatever dangerous game she'd glimpsed through that supply room door. Tomorrow would be normal. Breakfast, daycare, work. She would forget the man in the expensive suit and the weight of his gun in her hand. But some choices, once made, refuse to be unmade. And some nights change everything, even when we're not looking for change at all. Sunlight streamed through the diner's front windows as Riley clutched her coffee, dreading the morning shift. Her manager Brad's voice crackled over the intercom. "Riley, office, now." Her stomach dropped. The night's events felt distant in the morning light, like a fever dream of rain and blood. But Brad's grim expression when she entered his cramped office made it all too real. "Want to explain this?" He turned his laptop, showing grainy security footage. There she was, dragging a wounded man through the kitchen door. Her hands started to shake. "He needed help." "You endangered everyone here." Brad's face reddened. "What if those guys had come inside? What if they had guns?" "I couldn't just let him die," Riley said, but her voice sounded small. "Clean out your locker. You're done." He slapped her final paycheck on the desk. "And don't expect a reference." Riley's mind raced as she gathered her things. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Milo needed new shoes. His old ones had holes. The grocery money was already running thin. Outside, morning traffic hummed past the diner. A sleek black sedan pulled to the curb, and Riley's heart stuttered. The back door opened, and there he was, the man from last night, but transformed. His suit was pristine, his presence radiating cold authority. "Ms. Hart," his voice was exactly as she remembered. "Dominic Vale, we have unfinished business." He held out an envelope thick with cash. "For your assistance, along with a recommendation to any restaurant in the city. And this," he offered a business card with a single number. "If anyone asks questions about last night." Heat crawled up Riley's neck. "I don't want your money. This isn't charity. It's settling a debt." "No." She backed away, hugging her purse. "I helped because it was right, not for payment." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "As you wish." He slid back into the sedan, which pulled away smoothly. The walk to Milo's school helped calm her nerves. His face lit up when he saw her, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. "Early day, Mama?" "Something like that, baby." She took his small hand. "Let's go home." They were halfway up the apartment stairs when Riley noticed the draft. Their door stood ajar, glass crunching under her feet. Her heart stopped. "Stay behind me," she whispered to Milo. Their living room window was shattered, brick and glass scattered across the carpet. A piece of paper fluttered on the coffee table, held down by a shard. 5 words in block letters. "Samaritans die first." Milo pressed against her leg. "Mama?" Riley's hands shook as she pulled out the business card and dialed. 1 ring. 2. "Yes," Dominic's voice was clipped. "Someone broke in. There's a note. Address." When she told him, he continued, "Don't touch anything. Wait there." 20 minutes later, engines rumbled outside. Dominic appeared in the doorway, 2 men scanning the stairwell behind him. He moved straight to Riley and Milo, his focus razor sharp. He crouched to Milo's level, gently lifting the boy's chin. "I'm going to keep you and your mother safe. You have my word." Milo studied him with solemn eyes before nodding once. Dominic straightened. "You're leaving now. Both of you." "What? No, we can't just—" "They know where you live." His voice softened fractionally. "They know about your son." Riley looked at the broken window, the threatening note, at Milo's small face, trying so hard to be brave. 5 minutes to pack essentials, Dominic said. "My men will handle the rest." She wanted to argue, to assert control over her life, but Milo's safety came first. Always. "Okay, baby," she said. "Let's get your backpack." They filled 2 bags with clothes and necessities. Milo's dinosaur, Riley's photo album. Her hands trembled as she locked the broken door, streetlights flickering to life in the growing dusk. 2 black SUVs idled at the curb. Dominic opened the rear door, his expression brooking no argument. Riley lifted Milo in first, then slid beside him, her world narrowing to the weight of her son against her side and the quiet click of the door closing behind them. Through the tinted windows, she watched her apartment building shrink into the distance. The streetlights cast orange pools on the pavement, each one marking another step away from everything familiar, everything safe. Except now she realized safety was just an illusion she'd been clinging to. And this man, this stranger who'd bled in her supply room, was becoming the only solid thing in a world suddenly made of shadows. Milo dozed against her shoulder as the city blurred past. Riley caught Dominic watching them in the rearview mirror, his eyes unreadable in the gathering dark. She wanted to demand answers, to understand what she'd stumbled into that rainy night. But exhaustion weighed on her like lead, and questions would have to wait. The SUVs wound through the city's expensive district, where steel and glass towers reflected the last rays of sunset. Riley stroked Milo's hair, remembering how just that morning her biggest worry had been paying rent. Now she was running from nameless threats, trusting a man she'd met at gunpoint. Her life had shattered like her living room window, and she couldn't see yet how the pieces would fit back together. But as the sun disappeared behind the skyline, she held on to one truth. She would do anything to keep Milo safe, even if that meant putting their lives in the hands of Dominic Vale. The elevator climbed silently past floor after floor of the high-rise, its polished brass panels reflecting Riley and Milo's tired faces. Dominic stood motionless beside them, one hand resting on the coded panel he'd just used. The display blinked. 38, 39, 40. "Final floor," he said as the doors opened to a marble foyer. Crystal sconces cast warm light across cream walls and dark wood floors that stretched into shadows. Riley clutched Milo's hand tighter as they followed Dominic through the space. A tall man with close-cropped hair materialized from a side hallway, his stance military straight. "Hawk," Dominic nodded. "Status?" "Perimeter secure, systems active." Hawk's eyes flicked to Riley and Milo, assessing but not unkind. "Guest rooms are prepared." The penthouse unfolded before them. Open-concept living spaces with floor-to-ceiling windows framing city lights. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and white marble. Riley's footsteps echoed as she took it all in, trying not to feel small. "The pantry's stocked," Dominic said, leading them to a walk-in space that could have fit her entire kitchen. Shelves lined with everything from cereal to caviar made her stomach clench. "You didn't have to." "It's done," he turned to Hawk. "Show them the security measures." While Dominic disappeared down a hallway, Hawk guided them through a demonstration of the alarm system. His movements were precise as he pointed out sensors, panic buttons, and the tablet that controlled it all. "The elevator requires both a key card and code," he explained. "No one enters without clearance." He showed Riley how to arm and disarm the system, patient as she practiced the sequence. "Like a video game," Milo whispered, watching the lights change from red to green. Hawk's mouth twitched. "Exactly right, kid." In the kitchen, Riley found her voice again. She planted herself at the island, shoulders straight despite her exhaustion. "We need to establish some ground rules." Dominic had returned, jacket off and shirt sleeves rolled up. A hint of white bandage peeked through his partially unbuttoned shirt. He raised an eyebrow. "Rules?" "Yes. First, no swearing around my son. Second, no strangers in the living spaces without warning me first." She took a breath. "And third, my phone stays private. No tracking, no monitoring." His lips curved in that wolfish almost smile that made her pulse jump. "Agreed. And not agreed." "Excuse me?" "The first two, yes, the phone." He shook his head. "Security is non-negotiable." Before Riley could argue, Milo yawned widely. The clock above the oven read 9:45 p.m. "Time for bed, baby," she said softly. "Let's find your room." The guest room was bigger than their entire apartment bedroom. A king-sized bed dominated the space, its duvet thick and cloud-like. Milo's backpack looked tiny on the pristine carpet. "Bathroom's through there," Hawk said from the doorway. "Clean towels in the cabinet." Riley helped Milo through his bedtime routine, trying to maintain normalcy despite the surreal surroundings. He was asleep within minutes. small face peaceful against the oversized pillow. She found Dominic in the hallway, leaning against the wall. The bandage under his shirt had shifted slightly, drawing her eye. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Again. For that night. You already thanked me. And now I'm doing it again." His voice was low, almost gentle. "Get some rest, Riley. This is temporary, until things blow over." She wondered what things meant, but exhaustion weighed too heavily for questions. Her own room was across the hall from Milo's, equally luxurious and alien. The clock read 10:30 p.m. as she lay in bed, staring at the city through wall-to-wall windows. Lights twinkled like earthbound stars, somehow both beautiful and unsettling. Her mind spun with plans for tomorrow, job hunting, calling Milo's school, finding some grip on normal life. Footsteps in the hallway made her tense before she recognized Hawk's measured tread. One last security sweep. The sound faded, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Riley reached down, sliding her tote bag under the bed. She'd deal with everything tomorrow. The bag settled with a soft thump. Dominic's old phone still nestled unknown at the bottom, a silent piece of evidence from the night that had changed everything. The city breathed against the glass, its rhythm different from her old neighborhood but somehow soothing. She closed her eyes, trying not to think about the man down the hall or the way his thanks had sounded like a promise, or how his careful distance felt more intimate than closeness. Tomorrow she would start putting their lives back in order. Tomorrow she would be strong and practical and in control. But tonight, surrounded by luxury and danger and uncertainty, Riley let herself drift into uneasy sleep, while 40 stories below, the city kept its secrets. The penthouse settled into nighttime quiet. Hawk's footsteps made one more pass. Somewhere, Dominic was awake, probably working or planning or whatever men like him did in the dark hours. And in their borrowed rooms, Riley and Milo slept, temporary guests in a world of marble and shadows, protected and trapped all at once by the man whose blood Riley had once washed from her hands. Riley rose before sunrise, clinging to routine like a life raft. The penthouse kitchen felt too vast, too pristine, as she assembled Milo's lunch with mechanical precision. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, granola bar, normal things for a normal day. She scrawled a note on expensive stationery she'd found in a drawer. Taking Milo to school, back after drop-off. The pen scratched against marble as she signed her name, refusing to ask permission for something so basic. "Ready, baby?" she called softly. Milo emerged from his room, backpack dwarfing his small frame. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Riley's fingers brushed the key card in her pocket. A temporary pass, Hawk had explained. Like everything else here. Morning air hit them with autumn's bite. The street looked different in daylight. Sleek buildings stretching toward a pearl gray sky, suited executives striding past with coffee cups, a normal world going about its business. They made it one block before Riley's neck prickled. A beige sedan, unremarkable, except for how it matched their turns too perfectly. Her steps quickened, hand tightening on Milo's. "Mom." He caught her tension. "It's okay, just..." The words died as black SUVs materialized at both ends of the street. Her heart slammed against her ribs until she recognized Hawk behind the wheel of the nearest vehicle. He was out in seconds, moving with controlled urgency. "Mrs. Hart, let's get you both inside." "But school..." "Not today." He scooped Milo up like he weighed nothing, shielding him with his body as he crossed to the armored SUV. Riley turned, catching movement in her peripheral vision. Dominic emerged from another vehicle, his stride predatory as he approached the beige sedan now trapped between his convoy. The sedan's driver made a rookie mistake, jerking the wheel hard, trying to mount the curb. Dominic's hand shot out, yanking the door open before the car fully stopped. What happened next was too quick to follow. A blur of precise violence that ended with the driver face down on the pavement, arm twisted behind his back. Dominic's voice carried clearly in the morning quiet. "Who sent you?" The man's response was muffled. Dominic adjusted his grip slightly, and a pained gasp followed. "Wrong answer. Try again." Riley watched, unable to look away. This was a different Dominic than the wounded man she'd helped or the controlled businessman from yesterday. This was a predator in an expensive suit, completely at home with violence. "Mrs. Hart," Hawk's quiet voice broke through her trance. "Please get in the car." The SUV's interior smelled of leather and something metallic. Milo pressed against her side, small fingers finding hers. Through the tinted windows, she saw Dominic release the driver with a final warning. The man scrambled into his car and reversed awkwardly, nearly hitting a lamppost in his haste to escape. Dominic slid into the seat across from them as the convoy pulled away. His knuckles were slightly reddened, the only evidence of what had just happened. "They weren't mine," he said without preamble. "What?" "The men following you. They weren't from my organization." His eyes met hers, hard as granite. "Someone saw you that night. They think you matter to me now." "I don't matter to you," Riley snapped, even as fear coiled in her stomach. "No," he agreed quietly, "but they believe you do, which means you can't simply walk away anymore." The implications hit her like ice water. She was marked now, not just by Dominic's protection, but by someone else's malice. A target painted on her back because she'd chosen to help a dying man. "I need terms," she said finally, "if we're trapped in this." "Name them." "My dignity stays intact. I make all decisions regarding Milo, and no lies, even if you think the truth will scare me." Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe, or surprise at her backbone. Agreed. Just like that. Just like that. His gaze held hers, heavy with unspoken promises. "I protect what's mine, Riley, whether they actually matter to me or not." The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. Back in the penthouse, Riley watched Milo settle on the couch with his tablet, already adapting to their new reality with childlike resilience. Her phone felt heavy as she composed the text to his school. Milo will be attending remotely for a few days due to family circumstances. The lie tasted bitter. On the massive television, a news ticker crawled across the bottom. "Storm warning issued for metropolitan area." Beyond the windows, sunlight glinted off countless buildings like knife edges. Riley stared at her reflection in the glass, seeing the ghost of the woman who'd worked night shifts and lived paycheck to paycheck. That life felt impossibly distant now, shattered by one act of kindness in a rainy alley. She watched Dominic's reflection appear behind her, maintaining careful distance. His presence filled the space like smoke, dangerous and intangible. "I'll have someone collect supplies for remote learning," he said. "Whatever he needs." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, weighted with everything unsaid. Dominic nodded once and withdrew, leaving Riley alone with her thoughts and the city's cold glitter. Somewhere out there, unknown men were hunting for weak points in Dominic's armor. And somehow she had become one of those points, a vulnerability created by compassion. The storm warning flashed again, but Riley barely noticed. She was already weathering a different kind of tempest, one that had blown her into Dominic's orbit and showed no signs of releasing its grip. Days blurred together in the penthouse's carefully controlled atmosphere. Morning light spilled across the kitchen counter where Milo sat with his cereal, his tablet propped against the fruit bowl, displaying animated heroes in bright costumes. At the other end of the granite island, Dominic spread papers across the surface, his quiet voice discussing security rotations with two men in dark suits. "Batman would totally beat Iron Man," Milo announced, cutting through talk of patrol schedules. Dominic paused mid-sentence, his lips quirking. "You think so? Batman's smarter. He plans everything." Hard to argue with that logic. Dominic's eyes met Riley's over Milo's head as she worked at the stove. Something softened in his expression before he returned to his meeting. Riley cracked eggs into the pan, the routine domesticity at odds with Hawk's steady presence by the windows. He moved with military precision, checking angles and sightlines, while she stirred scrambled eggs and tried to pretend this was normal. "Mr. Vale needs fresh bandages," Hawk mentioned quietly as he passed. She nodded, noting how Dominic's hand occasionally drifted to his side. The wound was healing well. She'd seen it last night when changing the dressing. Her fingers had brushed an older scar beneath his ribs, ragged and pale against his skin. He'd gone still at her touch, but didn't pull away. The men departed after breakfast, leaving Dominic lingering over his coffee. He watched as Milo explained the intricate plot of his favorite show, offering serious commentary about plot twists that had Riley hiding her smile. "Thank you," he said later, while she replaced his bandage. His voice was low, meant only for her. "For the eggs or the medical care?" "Both. Everything." His eyes held hers, and for a moment the dangerous facade cracked, showing something raw underneath. The afternoon brought another lesson in survival. Dominic stood close behind her at the security panel, his hand covering hers as he demonstrated the complex sequence of numbers that would seal the elevator. 84379, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Then enter." Riley tried to focus on memorizing the code, not the solid heat of him at her back, or the way his fingers felt against hers. When she turned, he was closer than expected. This close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the weight of constant vigilance. "You never rest, do you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His smile was tired. "Rest is a luxury in my position." The position he spoke of became brutally clear at twilight. Hawk's phone buzzed with urgent messages. Outside, orange flames reflected off the building's glass face as 3 cars burned in the parking structure. Dominic stood at the window, his expression carved from stone as he read the report. "Valerio Costa," he said, the name bitter on his tongue. "He's making his move." "Who is he?" Riley asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Dominic was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with things unsaid. "Someone who thinks fear is the only currency worth trading in. Someone who saw weakness when I inherited my father's position." "You didn't want it?" She studied his profile, sharp against the city lights. "I wanted my father alive." The words fell like stones. "I wanted a different life, but we rarely get what we want in my world." He turned to face her, something vulnerable breaking through. "I learned quickly that anything soft becomes a target. Kindness, connection, love. They're all weapons in the wrong hands." The confession hung between them, heavy with implication. Riley thought of Milo, sleeping peacefully down the hall, and understood with stark clarity why Dominic kept his distance even as he protected them. Near midnight, she found him on the balcony. The wind pulled at his shirt, revealing glimpses of bandages underneath. Below, the street still smelled of smoke and gasoline. Emergency lights painted everything in stuttering red and blue. "We should go," she said quietly, joining him at the railing. "We're putting you at risk by staying." "You'd be dead before you reached the city limits." His bluntness should have frightened her. Instead, she found his honesty oddly comforting. "You don't have to protect us." "Yes, I do." He finally looked at her. "Because you protected me first." The wind caught her hair, and without thinking, he reached out to brush it back from her face. The gesture was startlingly gentle from hands she'd seen deliver violence. He pulled back quickly, but something had shifted between them. "Tell me what you need," he said, and she realized he really would listen. This man who commanded fear and respect, who could end lives with a word, was waiting for her answer. "I need to know we're not just chess pieces to you." Her voice stayed steady despite her racing heart. "That you see us as people, not just obligations." "Riley." Her name sounded different on his lips, weighted with meaning. "If you were just an obligation, I wouldn't be standing here having this conversation." She studied him in the city's glow, seeing past the armor he wore like a second skin. The man who discussed superheroes with her son, who said thank you for small kindnesses, who listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words mattered. The same man who had efficiently neutralized a threat this morning, who commanded an empire built on violence and shadow. The contradiction should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself drawn closer to the puzzle of him, wanting to understand the wounds that had shaped his walls. The wind carried sirens from below, a reminder that danger wasn't just theoretical. But here, in this moment, watching Dominic stare down at his burning cars with determination rather than fear, Riley felt strangely secure, protected not just by his power, but by his growing investment in their safety. The city stretched endlessly before them, a maze of light and shadow, each window potentially hiding friends or enemies. Dominic's world, and now somehow hers too. The afternoon sun spilled through bulletproof glass as Riley sat at the kitchen island, laptop open to a Zoom interview. She smoothed her blouse, trying to look professional, while Milo's blanket fort sprawled across the living room like a soft explosion. "Previous experience includes 4 years in hospitality," she explained to the hotel manager's pixelated face, fighting to keep her voice steady when Hawk passed behind her for the 3rd security sweep that hour. The manager nodded, making notes. "And your reason for leaving your last position?" Riley's fingers tightened on the mouse. "The establishment closed unexpectedly." Not technically a lie. In the living room, Milo emerged from his fort wearing a cape made from one of Dominic's expensive throw blankets. "Mom, look, I'm a superhero!" She gave him a quick smile before turning back to the screen. "I apologize. My son is doing remote learning this week." The interview wrapped up with practice pleasantries, but Riley knew her chances were slim. Her references were unreachable, her address temporary, her situation complicated by forces she couldn't explain. The elevator's soft chime announced visitors. Rex Marino, Dominic's consigliere, strode in with a leather portfolio and too sharp smile. Something about him made Riley's skin prickle. The way his gaze slid past her, how his politeness felt like plastic wrap stretched too thin. "Ms. Hart," he nodded, then turned to Dominic, who had materialized from his office. "We have situations requiring attention." They moved to the dining table, spreading papers like battle plans. Riley pretended to focus on Milo's schoolwork while catching fragments of conversation. "The 4th Street route is compromised," Rex reported, his voice a controlled hiss. "Martinez hasn't checked in for 48 hours, and there's a discrepancy in the Collins account. The payment was misfiled." Dominic's responses were measured, but Riley noticed the tension in his shoulders. Each update seemed designed to tighten the screws of pressure. 2 evenings later, Riley stood before a mirror in a borrowed Valentino, the black fabric falling like water. The charity gala was non-negotiable. Dominic needed to show strength, to be seen operating normally despite Valerio's provocations. "You look beautiful," he said from the doorway, his reflection appearing behind her. The compliment felt dangerous, like a match near gasoline. The ballroom dripped old money and newer judgments. Women with tennis bracelet smiles whispered behind champagne flutes, eyeing Riley like she was Dominic's latest charity project. Men in tailored suits assessed her worth to him, calculating leverage. She endured it with her chin high, remembering she'd faced worse than social sharks. But their eyes followed her, wondering what made her special enough to warrant Dominic's protection. The balcony offered escape. City lights sparkled below like scattered diamonds, the autumn air sharp with approaching winter. Riley gripped the stone railing, letting the cold ground her. "Ignore them," Dominic said, appearing beside her. "Their opinions mean nothing." "Do they know what you really do?" she asked. "They suspect. They benefit. They pretend not to see." His hand covered hers on the railing. "Like they pretend not to see how you're different." She turned to face him, pulse quickening at his proximity. "Different how?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Or she kissed him. The moment blurred into heat and need, his hands framing her face while hers gripped his lapels. It felt inevitable and impossible, like falling into orbit around a star that could either warm or burn her. He kissed like a man starved for tenderness, desperate but controlled. She matched his hunger, letting months of tension snap in the press of lips and clash of teeth. His thumb traced her jaw as though memorizing her, and she shivered at the possessive gesture. When they broke apart, reality crashed back like a cold wave. They were on display, watched by enemies and allies alike. This kiss had just painted an even bigger target on her back. "We need rules," she whispered, still close enough to feel his breath. "Boundaries." "Name them." His voice was rough. "No lies between us." She met his gaze. "No using this as leverage, and it ends when Milo and I are safe." Agreed. But his eyes said he knew, as she did, that those boundaries were as fragile as spider silk. They had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The ride home was silent, charged with unspoken words. Riley watched city streets blur past, her lips still tingling, her world tilting on its axis. In the penthouse, at 2 a.m., she laid out Milo's math worksheets and reading assignments for morning. Normal things, controllable things. But her hands shook slightly as she arranged pencils and notebooks. She could still feel the phantom pressure of Dominic's kiss, still smell his cologne mixed with night air. The simple act of organizing schoolwork felt like trying to build a fence to hold back an ocean. Milo's superhero drawings smiled up from the coffee table. Bright, innocent things that reminded her why she needed those boundaries. Her son deserved a mother who made smart choices, who put his safety above dangerous attractions. Yet when she touched her lips, remembering how right it had felt to kiss Dominic, she wondered if she was already past the point of smart choices. If that kiss had been less a beginning and more an admission of what had been building since that rainy night behind the diner. The city hummed beyond the windows, 1,000 lights in the darkness. Somewhere out there, enemies watched and waited. But here in the penthouse, arranging her son's schoolwork by lamplight, Riley tried to convince herself that control was still possible. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the kitchen into a bright sanctuary. Riley wiped down the granite counters, finding comfort in the routine of cleaning. Milo's cereal bowl sat in the sink, his Spider-Man placemat still dotted with milk rings. She reached into her tote for dish soap and froze. Her fingers brushed something hard and unfamiliar at the bottom. Pulling it out, she found a battered phone she'd never seen before. Then memory clicked into place. The rainy night at the diner, the chaos of hiding Dominic, her hurried cleanup afterward. "Of course," she muttered, remembering how she'd scooped everything up in her rush to erase evidence. The phone must have fallen from his jacket. Curiosity nagged at her. She found a charging cable that fit and plugged it in, telling herself she just wanted to confirm it was his before returning it. The screen flickered to life with a complicated lock pattern. To her surprise, the pattern was similar to one Milo used on his tablet. 5 points, like a star. The phone unlocked. Her breath caught. Instead of normal apps and photos, she found encrypted contact lists labeled with single letters and numbers. A hidden folder contained what looked like a digital ledger, complex spreadsheets mapping money flows between shell companies and offshore accounts. The amounts made her dizzy. This wasn't just a phone, it was a skeleton key to something massive. "What are you doing?" Dominic's voice cut through the kitchen like ice. Riley spun to find him in the doorway, his expression a dangerous mix of fear and fury. "I just found this in my bag," she said, keeping her voice steady. "From that night. I was going to tell you." "Were you?" He crossed the space between them in 3 swift strides. "Or were you keeping it as insurance? Leverage?" "I didn't even know what it was until 5 minutes ago." Heat rose in her cheeks. "Do you really think I'd play games with something that could get me killed? You have no idea what that device means." His hands gripped the counter edge, bracketing her without touching. "No idea what it could do?" "Then tell me." She met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Because right now, all I see is you assuming the worst of me." They stood locked in a silent battle of wills, breakfast dishes forgotten, morning sun painting harsh shadows across their faces. Finally, something in his expression shifted. "Only 3 people knew about that phone," he said, voice low. "Myself, my security chief, and my financial advisor. If our enemies are hunting it, one of them is a traitor." Riley's anger deflated, replaced by cold understanding. "That's why you were in that alley that night? Someone set you up?" He nodded once, jaw tight. "The question is who?" "We need to hide it," she said. "Somewhere they won't look." Her eyes scanned the kitchen, landing on the row of ceramic containers on the counter. She grabbed the flour tin, dumped half its contents into a plastic bag, and nestled the phone deep in the remaining powder. "No one checks the baking supplies," she explained, replacing the lid. "And if they do, they'll assume it's just flour." A ghost of approval crossed his face. "Creative." "I worked in food service. You learned to improvise." She wiped flour from her hands. "What now?" "Now I need to verify something." He pulled out his own phone, thumbs flying across the screen. "We'll decide what to do with it after." The morning stretched into afternoon, tension humming beneath normal routines. Riley helped Milo with his reading assignment, switched loads of laundry, all while hyper-aware of the innocent-looking flour tin. On the counter, Hawk returned around 4 with grocery bags, nodding to them both. "Traffic's clear, no tails." "Can we have spaghetti?" Milo asked, looking up from his book. "With meatballs?" "Sure, buddy." Riley forced a smile, trying to swallow the sour taste of earlier mistrust. "Want to help me roll them?" She focused on teaching Milo how to shape the meat into perfect spheres, on the simple pleasure of his small hands mimicking her movements. But her awareness kept sliding to Dominic in the study, making calls in a voice too low to hear, and to the phone hidden in innocent flower. The skyline outside deepened to purple, the sun sinking behind glass towers. Streetlights blinked on like stars falling upward. Riley measured pasta into boiling water and wondered how many other secrets were buried in their lives, how many more tests of trust lay ahead. Milo's laughter pulled her back as he proudly displayed a slightly lopsided meatball. "Look, Mom, this one's huge." "Perfect," she said, and meant it. Whatever complicated game they were caught in, some things remained beautifully simple. Her son's smile, the smell of garlic and herbs, the quiet satisfaction of making dinner together. She glanced at the flour tin, undisturbed among its ceramic siblings. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, new dangers. But for now, she chose to focus on the immediate, teaching Milo to cook, filling the penthouse with the scent of home, breathing through the lingering tension, one moment at a time. The city lights dimmed, then flickered back to life. In the penthouse, the fire alarm's shrill cry pierced the evening calm. Riley's heart stopped. "Milo!" She bolted from the kitchen, bare feet silent on marble, as Hawk's voice cut through the chaos. "Contact! East stairwell!" 2 shadows slipped through the emergency exit. The alarm screamed louder, masking footsteps and whispered commands. Riley sprinted toward Milo's room, her son's name a prayer on her lips. A gunshot cracked. Hawk's grunt of pain followed, but he moved like lightning, shoving Milo under the bed before taking position at the door. Blood darkened his sleeve. "Stay down," he ordered through gritted teeth. Both of you! Riley crawled to Milo, reaching for his hand in the darkness beneath the bed frame. Empty space met her fingers. Milo? Panic clawed up her throat. Milo! The next 14 minutes stretched like years. Riley searched every corner while Dominic's men secured the building. Each second without her son felt like drowning, like falling, like dying in slow motion. Hawk, despite his wound, coordinated the search through his earpiece, voice tight with controlled urgency. Northwest corner clear. Check the service corridors. Dominic moved through the chaos like a storm contained in human form, issuing commands in that deadly calm tone that meant someone would bleed for this. His eyes met Riley's across the room, and for a moment raw fear cracked through his mask. Then a voice crackled. Over the radio. Found him! Storage room, 3rd floor. Riley ran, down emergency stairs, past armed men, through corridors that blurred with tears and terror. She found Milo huddled behind cleaning supplies, shaking but unhurt. Baby! She gathered him close, breathing in his familiar scent. I'm here. You're safe. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small space. His eyes fixed on something pinned to Milo's shirt. A note in elegant handwriting. Trade what you owe, or we take more. The paper crumpled in his fist. This ends now. Back in the penthouse, Hawk received medical attention while reporting the breach details. They knew our protocols, disabled specific cameras, timed the power surge perfectly. Because they had inside help. Dominic's voice could have frozen flame. He turned to his phone, typing rapidly. I'm initiating a citywide lockdown. No one moves without clearance. He faced Riley, who hadn't let go of Milo since finding him. From now on, he has double protection, 2 shadows every moment. No. Riley's voice shook with fury and leftover fear. This isn't about protection anymore. They used my child as a bargaining chip. They made him part of your war. She stood, gentle hands guiding Milo toward his room. Get your pajamas on, baby. I'll be right there. Once Milo was out of earshot, she rounded on Dominic. We're done playing defense? That phone you're so worried about? We're using it. Every transaction, every contact. We'll expose whoever's willing to threaten a 6-year-old. It's not that simple. But his usual iron control wavered. The wrong move could trigger. They took my son! Her whisper carried more force than a shout. For 14 minutes, I didn't know if he was alive or scared or hurt. Simple stopped mattering the second they dragged him into this. Dominic studied her face, reading the steel beneath her terror. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow we plan. Tonight, stay with him. Riley spent hours curled around Milo in his race car bed, running fingers through his hair until his breathing evened out in sleep. She memorized his face, peaceful now, and silently promised that no one would ever use him as leverage again. When she was certain he wouldn't wake, she slipped into the darkened hallway. Dominic stood by the window, a rigid silhouette against city lights. His customary grace had hardened into something brittle, dangerous. Without words, Riley crossed to him. She pressed her palm to his back, feeling the minute tremors he hid from everyone else. Beneath her touch, years of control and calculation shuddered with the same fear she'd fought all evening. The city sprawled below them, a maze of lights and shadows where enemies planned their next move. But here, in this moment, they shared something raw and honest, the bone-deep need to protect what mattered most. Hawk's quiet footsteps approached. Perimeters secure, new protocols in place. Double the night watch, Dominic Hugh ordered, his voice steady despite the trembling under Riley's hand. And get me everything on Costa's movements this week. Already compiling it, Hawk's gaze flickered to Riley's hand on Dominic's back, then away with professional discretion. Medical team standing by if the kid needs anything. Riley nodded gratefully. The aftermath of trauma would hit Milo eventually. Nightmares, anxiety, the terrible questions no child should have to ask. But for now, he slept safely, and she let that knowledge steady her racing heart. Security teams moved through the penthouse like shadows, checking locks and sightlines. The fire alarm's memory echoed in Riley's ears, along with those endless minutes of searching. Her hand stayed pressed to Dominic's back, grounding them both in this quiet moment before tomorrow's storm. The clock on the wall read 11:15 p.m. In Milo's room, the nightlight cast star patterns on the ceiling. Somewhere in the city, a traitor sat at ease, believing their message delivered. They didn't know that their greatest mistake wasn't breaching the building. It was threatening a child in front of his mother. Dawn crept over the city's jagged skyline, painting the penthouse windows in pale gold. Riley hadn't slept, spending the night moving between Milo's bedside and the kitchen, where coffee grew cold in her cup. Her phone buzzed at 7 a.m., an unknown number. "Mrs. Hart." The voice was silk over steel, cultured and cruel. "I trust you're alone." Riley's fingers tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" "Valerio Costa. A pleasure to finally speak with the woman who's captured Dominic's attention." A pause, heavy with meaning. "And his protection." She moved to the bathroom, turning on the shower to mask her voice. "What do you want?" "A simple trade, that old phone you picked up at the diner, and its interesting ledger, in exchange for your son's permanent safety." His tone shifted, honeyed poison. "I'd hate to see little Milo caught in the crossfire of Dominic's situation." "You're threatening a child to get what you want." "I'm offering insurance." Valerio's laugh was soft. "Besides, the real threat's already inside. Close enough to taste Dominic's morning coffee, wouldn't you say?" Riley's blood ran cold. She glanced through the crack in the door, where Hawk stood guard and house staff moved through their morning routines. Someone here, someone trusted, was feeding information to the enemy. "Think carefully, Mrs. Hart," Valerio continued. "The phone for your son's future. Meet me alone, neutral ground, and this ends quietly." While he spoke, Riley's mind raced. She reached for the ancient phone hidden in the flour tin, activating its microphone. Every word, every threat began recording. "I'm not promising anything," she said carefully, "but I'll meet, alone. You choose the place." "Wise choice. I'll send coordinates within the hour." The line went dead. Riley stood in the steam-filled bathroom, hands shaking, as she saved the recording. Outside, she heard Milo's cartoons playing, Hawk's measured footsteps, the normal rhythm of a morning that felt anything but normal. She waited until noon, when Dominic returned from a meeting. He found her in the kitchen, stirring pasta for Milo's lunch. One look at her face and his shoulders tensed. "What happened?" She told him everything, the call, Valerio's offer, the warning about a traitor in their midst. With each word, Dominic's expression hardened until he was all sharp edges and cold fury. "I'll crush him!" His voice was lethal quiet. "Set up the meeting. My men will—" "No." Riley set down the wooden spoon with deliberate care. "No ambush, no soldiers, no bloodbath that puts Milo back in danger." "You think meeting him alone is safer?" Dominic stepped closer, radiating controlled rage. "Valerio Costa is a snake. He'll take the phone and kill you anyway. He won't risk it. Not in public, not when I have insurance." "What insurance?" She played the recording, watching his face as Valerio's threats filled the kitchen. "Proof. Of everything. And there's more where this came from." Their argument exploded in fierce whispers, conscious of Milo watching TV nearby. Dominic wanted to storm Valerio's strongholds, eliminate the threat permanently. Riley insisted that violence would only escalate, putting Milo at greater risk. "I can get more evidence," she pressed. "Find out who the traitor is. End this without a war." "By walking into his trap?" Dominic's hands gripped the counter, knuckles white. "I won't let you." "You don't let me do anything." Her voice cracked like a whip. "I'm not your soldier or your property. I'm a mother protecting her child." They stared each other down, neither willing to yield. Finally, Dominic's jaw clenched. "Conditions," he ground out. "Non-negotiable." "Name them." "You wear a tracker. Hawk stays within visual range. First sign of trouble, we move in." Riley considered, weighing options and angles. "Counteroffer. I wear the tracker, but Hawk stays far enough back that Valerio's people won't spot him, and you give me 3 hours before any intervention." 2 hours, Dominic countered, and Hawk picks the backup position. "Deal." She extended her hand, oddly formal. He gripped it, his touch lingering longer than necessary. "If anything happens to you," his voice roughened. "It won't." She squeezed his hand once before letting go. "I need to feed Milo." The afternoon stretched like pulled taffy. Riley helped Milo with his reading, played 3 rounds of Go Fish, all while her mind raced through contingencies. Church bells tolled from the reconstruction site down the block, marking time's steady march. At 4 o'clock, she sent the text message they'd discussed. Meeting coordinates for tomorrow, a public plaza where sculptures threw deep shadows. Her fingers hovered over the phone, mind already mapping the moves ahead, ones neither Valerio nor Dominic would expect. Hawk. appeared at her elbow with the tracker, sleek and unobtrusive. "I'll test it now if you're ready." She nodded, watching him secure the device, while Dominic spoke quietly with his security team. The pieces were falling into place, but not all of them knew which game they were really playing. Milo looked up from his coloring book. "Can we have spaghetti again?" "Of course, baby," Riley smiled, ruffling his hair. "Why don't you help me pick out the tomatoes?" In the kitchen, she kept one eye on her son and one on the wall clock. 20 hours until the meeting, 20 hours to prepare her own gambit, while two powerful men planned to control a game she refused to lose. Twilight painted the half-rebuilt church in shades of violet and ash. Scaffolding reached toward heaven like metal bones, and the air smelled of fresh cement and old incense. Riley pulled her plain black coat tighter, feeling the weight of the tracker hidden in its hem. From his perch on the scaffolding, Hawk maintained his watch, a shadow among shadows. They'd argued about positioning until he'd agreed to stay high, out of sight but within range. The empty church echoed with her footsteps. Plastic sheets rustled in the evening breeze, and construction tools lay scattered like abandoned prayers. A figure emerged from behind a pillar, moving with theatrical grace. "Mrs. Hart." Valerio Costa's voice was silk over steel, gentle as a confessional whisper. "Thank you for coming alone." She kept her distance, noting his expensive suit, his manicured hands, the way his eyes missed nothing. "You said you had proof about the traitor." "Ah, straight to business," he smiled, all teeth. "Did you bring what we discussed?" "Show me first." Valerio pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. Security footage played. The night of the rain, the alley behind the diner. A familiar figure appeared, Rex Marino, Dominic's trusted consigliere, speaking with men who later hunted through the trash for their wounded boss. "Rex sold the route that night," Valerio said softly. "Just as he's sold every route, every schedule, every weakness for months. Your kindness to Dominic became quite useful. A pressure point Rex helped me squeeze." Riley's stomach turned to ice. Rex, who never met her eyes, who always seemed to arrive with bad news, with compromised plans, with convenient failures. "Why tell me this?" "Because you're practical." Valerio stepped closer. "Give me the ledger now and I'll vanish. Your family stays untouched. Rex takes his fall. Everyone wins. Except Dominic. He inherited a crown he never wanted." Valerio shrugged. Perhaps losing it would be a gift. Riley's mind raced. The ledger in her bag felt heavy as lead. "I need to copy the files first," she lied. "Insurance. Give me tonight." "Careful." His smile thinned. "Don't mistake my civility for patience. One night, then you get what you want and my son stays safe." Valerio studied her, head tilted. "Until tomorrow. Then. Same time, same place." He melted back into the shadows, leaving Riley with knowledge that burned like acid. The wolf at their table wore Italian wool and a perfect Windsor knot. She walked out slowly, maintaining composure until she reached the car. Hawk materialized beside her, scanning for threats. "Everything okay?" "Drive," she managed. "Please." They hadn't made it 3 blocks before another vehicle cut them off. Sleek, black, familiar. Dominic stepped out, his expression arctic. "Inside. Now." Riley complied, sliding into his car while Hawk followed in hers. The moment the door closed, Dominic's control snapped. "You met him alone." His voice was deadly quiet. "After explicitly agreeing to wait. I traced the tracker," he continued when she didn't respond. "Found you in a condemned church with Costa. What did he offer?" "Rex is the traitor." The words fell like stones. "He sold your route the night of the shooting. He's been feeding Valerio information for months." Dominic went still. "Proof?" "Security footage, the night I found you." "And what does Valerio want in exchange for this revelation?" Riley's hands twisted in her lap. "The ledger. He'll disappear, leave us alone if I give it to him." "Us?" Dominic's laugh was bitter. "You're considering it." "For my son's safety? Yes." The car temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You'd betray me." "I'd protect my child," Riley's voice cracked. "There's a difference." "Not to me." He stared straight ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not anymore." They rode in frozen silence to the penthouse. Riley packed quickly while Dominic stood in the doorway, watching with empty eyes as she gathered Milo's things. "One night," she told him, zipping the last bag. "To think. That's all I'm asking." "Where?" "You know I won't tell you that." Milo was sleepy, confused by the late-night move, but trusting her when she said it was an adventure. She checked them into a small motel under an alias, tucked him into bed, and wrote a note with shaking hands. "I won't trade you, but I won't gamble my child." The motel room hummed with ancient heating. Outside, traffic whispered past like secrets. Riley sat in a chair by the window, watching her son sleep while her mind spun through impossible choices. The ledger in her bag could destroy an empire, could save her child, could break a man who'd become more than just her protector. Milo mumbled in his sleep, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. The sight squeezed her heart. He was so small, so precious, so completely dependent on her choices, on her ability to navigate this minefield of loyalty and betrayal. The clock crept toward midnight. Tomorrow would bring decisions that couldn't be undone. But tonight, in this anonymous room with its faded wallpaper and humming heater, she could hold on to the illusion of choice for a few more hours. She touched the tracker in her coat hem, knowing Dominic could find them if he wanted, knowing he wouldn't, because even furious and betrayed, he respected her boundaries. That thought hurt worse than fear. The night stretched ahead, long and dark and full of consequences waiting to be chosen. Riley watched the first gray fingers of dawn creep across the motel ceiling. She hadn't slept. The ledger's weight pressed against her ribs from its hiding spot in her jacket, a digital noose that could hang everyone she cared about. But she had a plan. Her fingers moved mechanically over the laptop she'd borrowed from the motel's business center, copying the ledger's contents to a slim flash drive. Lines of numbers and names flowed past, each one a potential weapon. The original phone lay gutted beside her, its SIM card destroyed and memory transferred. On the second phone, the decoy, she loaded a dummy file, elegant in its emptiness with an invisible tracker embedded in its code, the kind that would ping every police scanner in a 5-mile radius once activated. Milo stirred in the bed, mumbling about breakfast. "Soon, baby," she promised, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. She wrote the note to Dominic with precise strokes. "Trust me or kill me, your choice." The words felt like a gamble with loaded dice, but she knew Dominic, knew the man behind the monster. He'd either understand or he wouldn't. There was no middle ground with him. She dialed Captain Doyle's direct line from memory, counting the rings. He'd been a regular at the diner, always left good tips, treated her like a person instead of furniture. More importantly, he had a reputation for doing things by the book while still getting results. "Riley Hart?" His voice was cautious. "Been a while." "I need 5 minutes. It's about Valerio Costa." A pause. "Where?" They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the motel, Milo safely watching cartoons under Hawk's watchful eye. Doyle listened without interrupting as Riley laid out her plan, the warehouse sting, the public exchange, the media circus that would make it impossible for anyone to disappear quietly. "Costa's ego will demand an audience," she explained. "He'll want witnesses when he thinks he's winning. And Vale? Will come whether I want him to or not. Might as well use that." Doyle studied her over his cooling coffee. "You're playing with fire." "I've been burning since that night in the alley." She met his gaze. "Help me make it mean something." They spent an hour coordinating details. The warehouse was perfect. Valerio used it for high-end auctions, which meant security cameras he couldn't disable without raising suspicion. Doyle would position cruisers just beyond their range, waiting for her signal. She called Valerio next, voice cool and professional. "Sunset, the auction warehouse. Bring whatever audience you want. I'll have what you need." His chuckle slithered through the phone. "Bold choice." "I'm done hiding." She sent the same location to Hawk, knowing he'd tell Dominic. Knowing Dominic would come, if only to witness what he'd see as her final betrayal. The thought hurt, but she pushed through it. Trust had to be earned back later. Right now, she needed him angry enough to show up, smart enough to watch before acting. The hardest part came next, placing Milo. She'd vetted Doyle's sister thoroughly, a kindergarten teacher with a secure brownstone 3 blocks from the warehouse, close enough for a quick extraction, far enough to be safe from any fallout. 2 of your best men," she told Hawk. "But they answer to me until sunset. Non-negotiable." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Greco and Martinez, they're solid." She hugged Milo tight, breathing in his little boy's scent of crayons and syrup. "Remember what I said? It's like a special mission." "Like spies?" His eyes lit up. "Exactly like spies. You stay with Miss Sarah until I come get you. Greco and Martinez are your backup, okay? Okay. He looked so serious, trying to be brave for her. You'll come back? Always. She kissed his forehead. That's a promise. The afternoon stretched like taffy as final pieces fell into place. She checked and rechecked every detail: the dummy phone, the real drive hidden in a hollow heel, the tracker in her jacket, the backup phones with Doyle's direct line. At 4:30, she stood on the pier behind the warehouse, watching gulls wheel against the darkening sky. Their cries sounded like omens, but she couldn't afford superstition now. The wind off the water carried the smell of salt and rust, tugging at her hair as she clutched the decoy phone. Everything hinged on timing, on reading the players correctly. Valerio's pride, Dominic's anger, Rex's desperation, the media's hunger for spectacle. All of it had to align just right. She touched the hidden drive containing the real ledger. In a few hours, it would either save them all or destroy everything. But that was the gamble, wasn't it? Nothing worth having came without risk. The gulls banked sharply, knifing through the wind with precise grace. Riley watched them, letting their movements calm her racing thoughts. She'd chosen this path, chosen to fight instead of run, to trust her instincts about both the threat and the solution. I'm coming back, she whispered to the wind, to the water, to the sun waiting 3 blocks away. I'm coming back wearing the life I want. The words felt like a prayer, like a promise, like the first true thing she'd said since this all began. The life she wanted wasn't the one she'd had before, safe, small, invisible, but it wasn't this shadow dance of threats and power plays either. The sun began its slow slide toward the horizon, painting the warehouse windows in sheets of copper and gold. Soon, the players would take their places, the cameras would roll, the trap would spring. Riley checked her watch. 2 hours until sunset, time enough to do one final sweep of the warehouse's public areas, to confirm positions with Doyle, to make sure Milo was settled with his backup close. She took one last look at the water, at the gulls writing their swift messages across the sky. Then she turned toward the warehouse, each step measured and sure. The decoy phone weighed nothing in her pocket, but the real ledger pressed against her like armor. The setting sun painted everything in sheets of molten copper as Riley stood beneath the warehouse's harsh floodlights. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands remained steady. Around her, the evening air crackled with tension. Right on cue, Valerio strode in with his entourage, 3 armed men and a camera crew streaming live to hungry screens across the city. His smile stretched like a razor cut. Such theatrics, Ms. Hart. Movement rippled in the shadows. Dominic emerged, hawk a deadly shadow at his shoulder. His face was carved from stone, but Riley saw the betrayal burning in his eyes when they locked onto her. The device, Valerio purred, gesturing. Riley held up the dummy phone. Guns down first, all of them, or this takes a swim. She edged closer to the harbor's edge, making the threat clear. Valerio's men tensed, but he waved them back with an elegant flick of his wrist. You wound me. We're all friends here. Then you won't mind if your friends lower their weapons? The camera's red light blinked steadily, broadcasting every second. Riley felt the weight of unseen viewers, knew the press would be scrambling to decode this tableau. The notorious Valerio Costa, the enigmatic Dominic Vale, and a woman holding what looked like a simple phone. Valerio's men slowly lowered their weapons. The moment stretched taut as piano wire. Riley drew a deep breath. Checkmate! The code word triggered an avalanche. Police cruisers roared out of the darkness, lights strobing. Officers poured from behind shipping containers. And somewhere in the chaos, a notification pinged on countless screens as the real ledger went live, streaming from Rex's own encrypted cloud straight to every major news outlet. No! Rex's voice cracked like glass. He lurched forward, gun appearing in his hand, aimed at Dominic's chest. Riley didn't think. She threw herself at the nearby forklift, jamming the key still in the ignition. The engine roared as she slammed it into reverse, sending stacked crates crashing down. The avalanche of boxes forced Rex to dive aside, breaking his aim. The shot went wide, catching Dominic's upper arm instead of his heart. He moved like lightning through the pain, closing the distance to Rex in 3 fluid steps. Their struggle was brief and brutal, a dance they'd begun that rainy night by the diner, now reaching its bloody conclusion. Valerio tried to slip away in the chaos, heading for the maze of docks. He made it 3 steps before Doyle's team cut him off, cuffs flashing in the floodlights. Costa, Doyle said, voice dry as dust. Hands where we can see them. The cameras caught everything. Rex's desperate grab for power, Valerio's failed escape, the evidence streaming to every device in the city. They caught the moment Rex realized he'd lost, his face twisting as he understood how completely Riley had outmaneuvered him. A waitress, he spat, blood on his teeth. A nobody. A mother, Riley corrected, standing in the broken light. Her voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. You should have remembered that. Hawk was already moving to Dominic, medical kit in hand. The bullet had only grazed him, but blood darkened his sleeve. Their eyes met across the debris-strewn concrete, and Riley saw the moment understanding replaced betrayal in his gaze. She hadn't sold him out, hadn't traded his secrets or his trust. She'd only traded away the fear that had kept her small, kept her running. In its place stood something stronger, the certainty that came from choosing your ground and holding it. The warehouse echoed with activity as officers secured the scene. Evidence teams photographed the scattered crates, the dropped weapons, the blood on the concrete. The camera crew kept rolling, drinking in every detail of this spectacular fall from power. Doyle moved through the chaos with calm efficiency, directing his people, cataloging statements. He paused beside Riley. Clean work? Mostly clean, she amended, looking at Dominic's arm. Can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Doyle's mouth twitched. Or crates, apparently. The floodlights cast harsh shadows as Hawk finished bandaging Dominic's arm. The white gauze was stark against his dark shirt, but his movements remained fluid, controlled. Power hummed beneath his skin, undiminished. Riley watched him approach, her pulse steady now. The fear that had lived in her bones since that rainy night felt distant, transformed into something else, something that recognized strength instead of running from it. You could have told me, he said quietly. You needed to react naturally, and I needed you angry enough to come. Angry enough to watch you betray me, you mean? Angry enough to watch me save us all. She met his gaze steadily, including you. Around them, the scene continued to unfold. Officers led Rex and Valerio to separate cars. Evidence disappeared into labeled bags. Reporters gathered at the perimeter, shouting questions that echoed off the warehouse walls. The sirens faded into the distance, carrying away the architects of so much fear and chaos. Riley stood in the copper-bright aftermath, feeling the weight of choices and consequences settle around her shoulders like a familiar coat. She had gambled everything, but not Dominic's life, not his trust. She'd only gambled with fear itself, betting that love would prove the stronger hand. Looking at the mix of pride and wonder in Dominic's eyes, she knew she'd won. The floodlights cast their stark illumination over broken crates and scattered papers, over blood drops and bullet casings. But they also caught the moment Dominic reached for her hand, his fingers sliding between hers with careful intent. They stood together in that harsh light, neither hiding nor running, while around them the city's hunger for spectacle began to quiet into something like understanding. The cameras caught that too, the simple truth of a woman who had refused to be afraid, who had turned a mother's love into a weapon that toppled empires. Morning light spilled across the city's skyline as newspapers hit doorsteps with headlines that made coffee cups pause halfway to lips. Dominic Vale steps down, empire transitions to legitimate enterprise. In the penthouse, Riley watched the news coverage spread like wildfire across every channel. Reporters crowded outside the corporate building where Dominic would make his announcement, their cameras ready to capture what many thought impossible. A king willingly laying down his crown. Are you ready? Dominic asked, adjusting his tie in the bedroom mirror. His wounded arm moved smoothly now, nearly healed. To become CEO of a legitimate corporation, not even close. Riley smoothed her blazer, a deep blue that matched the morning sky. But I'm ready to make it work. Milo sat at the kitchen counter, munching cereal and watching cartoons while Hawk double-checked their route. The boy seemed unfazed by the morning's gravity, more concerned with whether he could have 2 desserts at dinner. The press conference was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Dominic stood at the podium, cameras flashing like lightning as he detailed the transformation of his empire. Assets would be legitimized, books open to scrutiny, and leadership transferred to Riley Hart, a woman who had proven her business acumen by outmaneuvering the city's most dangerous players. The future requires clean hands, Dominic announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. And there are none cleaner than those of Riley Hart. Riley signed document after document, feeling the weight of empire settle onto her shoulders. But this weight felt different. It was chosen, not forced. Each signature represented a brick in the wall between her family and the darkness they'd escaped. Captain Doyle stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching the spectacle with knowing eyes. When Riley caught his gaze, he gave a slight nod. They both understood the elegant solution: power held by someone who had proven they wouldn't abuse it. Society columnists typed furiously on their phones, already spinning stories of scandal and romance. But they missed the real story: how love hadn't softened a monster, but rather shown a man a better path. The courthouse ceremony was small, intimate. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting everything in gentle gold. Milo took his ring-bearer duties with utmost seriousness, walking carefully down the short aisle with the cushion held steady. "I promise to keep blood from our doorstep," Dominic vowed, his voice low and fierce. "To cherish what you've given me, to protect without caging, to love without possessing." "I promise to trust what you've become," Riley answered. "To build something clean together, to never run from what we've found." Their new house sat on 3 acres outside the city limits, where security felt like privacy instead of prison. The driveway wound through trees that whispered in the evening breeze, leading to a home with warm lights and open spaces. Hawk manned the grill on the back patio, the smell of barbecue drawing Milo from his video game. The boy darted between adults, negotiating with the skill of a tiny diplomat for extended bedtime privileges. "One extra story," Riley conceded, watching him race back inside. "But homework first." In their bedroom, Riley pulled the old phone from her bag, the device that had started everything. It felt smaller now, less dangerous. She placed it in a drawer beside her wedding ring box, closing it on that chapter of their lives. The kitchen glowed with soft light as evening settled. Dominic found her by the window, watching fireflies dance in the yard. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hand with the reverence of a man who knew exactly what he'd gained and what he'd nearly lost. His lips pressed against her palm, the same hand that had once saved him in a rainy alley, that had bandaged his wounds, and later helped him build a better future. 8:15 tomorrow, she murmured, running her fingers through his hair. "School drop-off. Then brunch," he added, smiling against her skin. "At Maria's diner." The same diner where she'd once served coffee, where regulars like Doyle had left decent tips and treated her with respect. The owner had called that morning, offering congratulations and a standing reservation at her favorite booth. Through the window, they could see Hawk showing Milo how to catch fireflies in a jar. The security team patrolled the perimeter with professional discretion, nearly invisible among the trees. Protection without pressure, safety without suffocation. Dominic rose, pulling Riley to her feet and into his arms. They swayed slightly, dancing to music only they could hear while the evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket. This was their victory. Not the empire, not the revenge, but this quiet moment in a warm kitchen, planning tomorrow's ordinary miracles.